Today's story takes place in a Seattle and nearby Tacoma. Now let's get right into it. Is greater than. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 28 years old. And the morning my father banned me from Thanksgiving, I was sitting under fluorescent office lights tracing missing money through a chain of shell accounts for a client who lied better than most criminals. My phone lit up with home and I almost ignored it. I should have. The second I answered, my father didn't say hello. He said, "Don't come to Thanksgiving. You're a 28-year-old failure, and nobody here wants to look at you across the table." I actually thought I'd misheard him. So, I asked why. Then, my mother's voice crashed through the speaker, sharp enough to cut glass. "Because you still rent that depressing apartment. No husband, no kids, no house, no real life. Your cousin just bought her second home and you're still acting like a confused teenager with a paycheck." I could hear laughter behind her. Not one person tried to stop it. Then my brother grabbed the phone and announced like he was reading election results. "We took a family vote. You're banned." Even Grandma said, "You ruined the mood." More laughter. Then came the real reason. My father got back on the line and said, "You have 24 hours to pay off our credit cards. 5,200美元. You owe this family for everything we did for you." My mother laughed and added that they had already found the $4,000 I hid in my old room and decided it counted as my first payment. That was the moment the insult turned into theft. They had gone into a place I once thought was safe, taken the only emergency money I had quietly built, and placed my humiliation on speaker so an audience could enjoy it. I told them they were going to regret this decision more than anything in their lives, and they hung up before I could say another word. I did not cry. I sat there under those office lights, replaying the whole call like evidence in a case file. Public humiliation, group intimidation, extortion, theft. The language was ugly, but it was also familiar. They had always needed me smaller than I was. That evening I went back to my Seattle apartment, the small place they loved to mock, and walked into the silence I had earned without their help. By 9 o'clock, the texts started piling up. My mother sent a picture of the Thanksgiving place cards with one seat missing and typed that there was no point pretending. My sister added a laughing emoji. My brother joked that failure would be my side dish. Then a cousin messaged me privately and warned that the family was already telling people I had abandoned Thanksgiving and refused to help. That was when I understood the insult was only one layer. They were building a story before I could speak, and families like mine never panic unless money is already on fire. Close to midnight, I logged into an old bank portal tied to the account where I had once moved small emergency amounts. The balance was empty, which I expected, but the recent login history showed a device ping from Tacoma at my parents' house. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not borrowing. It was theft with a timestamp. I leaned back at my kitchen table and let one thought settle all the way in. They did not ban me because I was failing. They banned me because I was the only person in the family who could see the math behind their performance. 3 days later, at 1:30 in the morning, someone started pounding on my apartment door hard enough to rattle the glasses in my cabinet. I woke up to my sister shouting my name, my brother cursing, and my mother suddenly using the soft, desperate voice she saved for emergencies she wanted other people to solve. She called me baby. She said they were worried. She said they were sorry. Through the door, I heard her hiss to someone in the hall that if I did not open up, they would lose everything. That sentence told me more than any apology. They were not there because love had finally arrived. They were there because the crisis had moved faster than their lies. I stayed in the dark and listened. My sister whispered something about cards. My brother snapped at her to be quiet. My mother kept raising her voice just enough to sound convincing for the neighbors. 3 days earlier, I had been a disgrace too embarrassing to let near the holiday table. Now I was the daughter they needed to rescue the family image, the house, and whatever deal was collapsing underneath them. I did not open the door. I sat on the floor beside my couch and let the distance settle in. After almost 40 minutes, the hallway went quiet, and I heard the elevator doors slide shut. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and texts that swung between panic and blame. My father wrote only one line. Whatever stunt you pulled, end it now. I answered none of them. I made coffee, opened my laptop at the little kitchen table my family considered proof that I had no life, and did the one thing I always do when emotion gets loud. I started organizing evidence. I pulled bank statements, screenshots, archived texts, voicemail recordings, old email chains, and every family message I had saved in moments when some part of me suspected I would eventually need proof that the cruelty was real. Around 10 in the morning, I texted the one person I trusted enough to tell the whole truth. Camila Reed had trained me when I first joined the firm and had always treated me like a capable adult instead of a problem to fix. She called almost immediately. I told her about the speakerphone humiliation, the stolen money, the demand for $52,000, the fake family vote, and the chaos outside my apartment door in the middle of the night. She listened without interrupting, then said something that landed harder than I expected. This is not family conflict. This is coercion, theft, and reputational abuse wrapped in blood ties. I closed my eyes because the accuracy of it almost hurt. After we hung up, I opened a blank document and typed a title that came to me before I could censor it. What they call love when control stops working. Then I began writing in plain sentences, not like a woman begging to be believed, but like someone creating a clean record. The memories came quickly once I stopped defending them. My father praising me in public and minimizing me in private. My mother warning that educated women ended up alone if they did not learn gratitude. My brother borrowing money he never repaid while still being treated like the golden child. My sister mocking my apartment and age, then coming to me whenever she needed practical help. Every holiday had the same hidden math. My achievements mattered only if they did not threaten anyone else's status. My usefulness was expected. My dignity was optional. Camila texted me around noon and wrote that when the whole room benefits from you feeling small, your healing will always look like rebellion to them. I read that line several times, then started making administrative changes that felt far bigger than paperwork. I removed myself from shared accounts, changed my emergency contact, updated my beneficiaries, and erased my parents' address from every form that still carried the ghost of obligation. Each click felt like taking one structural beam out of the cage they thought I would live in forever. By late afternoon, my kitchen table was covered with printed statements, handwritten notes, timestamps, and a legal pad where I mapped the sequence of events the way I would map a fraud review at work. Once I stopped looking at my family as family and started looking at them as a pattern, the truth became obvious. The demand for $52,000 had been too exact to be theatrical. It was an emergency number. I traced what I could through public records, old conversations, and the carelessness of people who never imagined the designated failure in the family might be the one who understands numbers best. The story, underneath the cruelty, surfaced fast. My parents had not just been overspending. They had been juggling disaster. Credit cards rolled into personal loans patched over with cash advances. Minimum payments made with money grabbed from anywhere they could reach. All of it hidden behind centerpieces, smiling photos, and smug remarks about other people's choices. Then I found a recent refinancing record tied to the house my father had used for years as proof that he was wiser than me because he owned instead of rented. The structure looked rushed, expensive, and fragile. The house was not security. It was stage design. The missing piece arrived through a cousin who sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my brother had deleted. In it, he wrote that I was selfish for refusing to help my parents after all they had sacrificed. My sister commented that I always played the victim when people expected accountability. My mother had liked both posts. They had not only insulted me in private, they had tried to isolate me socially so that extortion would look like duty. That was not messy emotion. That was coordinated pressure. I documented everything. I filed a report with the bank about unauthorized access. I changed passwords, recovery emails, and security questions. I called customer service lines with a voice so calm, the agents had no idea I was dismantling the last access points my family still imagined belonged to them. That night, my father left another voicemail. He was furious, but not because he felt guilty. He said people were asking questions, and I was making them look bad. That was the clearest proof yet. Their panic had never been about love. It was about control, image, and the terror of consequences arriving in public. Thanksgiving night was almost over when they came back for the second time. I knew from the first harsh buzz downstairs that whatever mask they still had was slipping. This time I went straight to the peephole. My mother stood closest with rain in her hair and her coat half buttoned. My sister looked polished in the wrong way for the weather, like she had dressed for a version of the evening that no longer existed. My brother's face carried that familiar, hard expression he wore whenever fear had nowhere to go but anger. Down at the curb, I could make out my father sitting rigid behind the wheel of a dark sport utility vehicle, too proud to come upstairs and too desperate to leave. I opened the door only a few inches and kept the chain latched. "You have 2 minutes," I said. My mother tried to step forward and reached for the old tender language. "Baby, please." I stopped her there. 3 days earlier I was a failure, an embarrassment, and a bill you wanted paid. Pick one and stay consistent. The softness on her face cracked. My brother said this had gone too far. I told him it had gone exactly where they had driven it. Then my sister blurted out the first useful truth of the night. Their lender had frozen things. People had seen the Facebook post before Grant deleted it. Screenshots were moving around the family. Grandma knew about the money. When I asked what she knew, my mother admitted they had taken the $4,000 and that my grandmother had never voted against me at all. My father had used her name as cover, because he assumed I would not check. My brother muttered that Dad should not have said that, as if the problem was phrasing instead of theft. My mother cried harder and claimed they had taken the money only to stop a payment from bouncing and had intended to put it back. I asked with what? Silence answered first. Then my brother snapped that they needed help. There it was. No reconciliation, no honest remorse. Just the naked demand, dragged into the hallway where even the walls could hear how little of this had ever been about family, and how much of it had always been about access to me. They finally said it plainly. My father could lose the house. Everything could fall apart. My mother said he would never recover from the shame. My sister whispered that the whole family was talking. My brother tried one last time to frame their emergency as my moral duty. I met each of them with the facts. "You stole from me. You lied about Grandma. You mocked me publicly. You tried to pressure me into covering a debt you created while treating me like a disgrace. Do not stand in my hallway and talk as if I caused the flood after you spent years drilling holes in the boat." The silence that followed felt different from every silence I had ever known with them. It was not the old silence where I made myself smaller so they could stay comfortable. It was the silence that appears when truth finally takes up enough space that nobody can step around it. My mother asked what I wanted from them, and for a second, I thought about all the simple things I had wanted for most of my life. Respect, honesty, a place at the table that was not conditional on usefulness. But by then, those were no longer my terms. I told them what would happen next. The money they stole was gone. Consider it partial repayment for years of manipulation and emotional abuse. From that moment on, none of them were to contact me, except in writing. No surprise visits, no calls, no messages through cousins, no workplace contact, no vague emergencies designed to trigger guilt. If any of them lied about me again, threatened me, or tried another public shaming campaign, I would release the screenshots, the voicemails, the login records, and every document showing exactly what they had done. My sister covered her mouth. My mother looked like the floor had shifted beneath her. My brother went pale and then angry. He asked if I was really going to destroy my own family. I told him no. I was going to stop protecting them. That was the line that landed hardest, because protection had always been the silent arrangement. They could say anything, take anything, and I was expected to preserve their image while mine absorbed the damage. When my mother whispered that they were still my family, I answered with the only truth left. I know. That is what makes this unforgivable. I closed the door before they could regroup into a fresh version of the lie. The click of the lock sounded small, but inside me it landed like history ending. For a long time I stood with my hand against the wood and listened to the elevator carry them away. The apartment around me felt larger than it ever had, Not because the square footage changed, but because shame had finally left the room. I went back to my couch, reopened the essay I had been writing, and read it from the top with new eyes. It was not dramatic. It was not cruel. It was simply honest about the system they had built around me. At the end, I added 3 lines that felt less like writing and more like the final shape of something I had known for years. Family is not supposed to be the place where dignity is negotiated. Leaving people who only love you when you are useful is not cruelty. The most complete revenge is building a life that no longer needs their permission to feel whole. Then, I published it. At first, nothing happened. The city lights stayed soft outside my window, and the room remained still enough to make me feel almost foolish for expecting a response. Then my phone buzzed. 1 notification became 6, and 6 became a flood. Strangers were sharing the essay. A woman in Ohio wrote that she was reading it in her car outside her parents' house because she did not know if she could go inside. A man in Colorado said his family treated him like an emergency fund and called him selfish whenever he refused. A teacher in Arizona said it was the first time she had seen someone explain the difference between love and control so clearly. A college student wrote that she had spent years believing she was dramatic when in reality she had been trained to doubt herself. The messages kept coming, and every one of them told me the same thing in a different accent. The pattern I had survived was recognizable. It had names. It existed in other houses, with other holiday tables. My story was no longer trapped inside the version my family had curated for years. Even better, it was no longer trapped inside the version I had used to survive. I did not have to keep translating cruelty into stress or theft into sacrifice just because the people doing it shared my last name. Each new message from a stranger loosened something old in me. The room did not feel empty anymore. It felt witnessed. By midnight, the essay had spread farther than I ever intended. A mental health page reshared it. A writer I admired quoted 1 paragraph and called it necessary. Camila sent me a screenshot of the growing comments and wrote that I had not just told the truth, I had given people language for what they survived. I cried then, but not the confused, ashamed kind of crying that had followed so many family holidays in the past. These tears came from release. Around 1 in the morning, a cousin sent a quiet update from Tacoma. My aunt was crying. My uncle sat in stony silence. Grant's friends had found the screenshots of the deleted post. Tessa had locked herself in a bathroom. Nobody in the house was eating. I read the message and waited for triumph. But triumph never came. What I felt was cleaner than that. It was the collapse of a narrative. For years, my family had controlled the script. Naomi is selfish. Naomi is difficult. Naomi is too sensitive. Naomi is failing. Naomi should be grateful anyone still includes her. But once the truth existed outside their walls, once strangers could see the pattern in plain language, the lie lost its oxygen. My mother could cry, and my father could rage, and my siblings could scramble for softer versions of their behavior, but none of them owned the story anymore. I made fresh tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and stood by the window looking over wet Seattle streets. For the first time in years, I did not feel late to my own life. I did not feel behind because I rented, or lesser because I was unmarried. What my family had called failure was independence. They hated it because independence cannot be manipulated as easily as shame. The apartment they mocked as too small and too plain had become the first place I truly belonged to myself. Every lamp, plate, bill, and quiet routine in that space had been earned without their approval. Peace did not need to look impressive to be sacred. That realization settled into me more deeply than any apology they could have offered at my door. I looked around the apartment with a different kind of gratitude then. The thrifted bookshelf, the chipped cereal bowl I still loved, the throw blanket folded over the couch arm. None of it was glamorous, but every object carried the same message. I had built a real life, quietly, without applause, without a husband as proof, without a house used as a trophy. The life they called insufficient had held me together when the people who should have loved me most were trying to turn me into a payment. I do not know what exact story my parents tell now. Maybe my father still says I betrayed the family. Maybe my mother tells people I aired private pain for attention. Maybe my brother insists I overreacted, and my sister says everybody said things they did not mean. Consequences often make dishonest people suddenly interested in intention. They want to rename cruelty as stress, theft as misunderstanding, public shaming as a mistake. But I know this now. People who depend on your silence will always call honesty betrayal. People who mistake access for ownership will always call boundaries cruelty. And people who laugh while you hurt do not get to audition for compassion the moment the spotlight turns toward them. Sometime after 2 in the morning, I shut my laptop and looked at my reflection in the dark window. Earlier that week, I had looked like someone bracing for the next blow, the next holiday, the next demand hidden inside a family tradition. Now I looked like someone arriving, not magically healed, not untouched, but present, awake, and no longer negotiating for the right to exist in peace. They thought banning me from Thanksgiving would make me desperate enough to buy my way back into the family. They thought shame would weaken me. They thought if they mocked me hard enough, I would return carrying apology, money, and gratitude for another chance to be used. Instead, they pushed me past the last point of fear. 3 days after my father banned me from Thanksgiving, they ended up at my door asking for the daughter they had humiliated, underestimated, and tried to convert into a payment plan. They did not get her back. What stood on the other side of that door was someone they no longer knew how to control. That is the lesson I wish I had learned years earlier. The people who make you earn your right to exist in peace are not protecting family. They are protecting power. Walking away from that is not abandonment. Sometimes it is rescue. Sometimes it is the first honest boundary of your life. And sometimes the quiet that follows is not loneliness at all. It is the sound of your real life finally beginning. By the time dawn started thinning the dark over Seattle, I had changed every remaining password, blocked the last unknown numbers tied to my relatives, and left a short note for myself on the kitchen table. Do not confuse guilt with responsibility. I kept that note there for weeks. Not because I was likely to forget the facts, but because bodies remember old training long after the mind understands the truth. In the days that followed, I went back to work, answered emails, bought groceries, paid rent, and kept building a life that no longer bent around family emergencies designed to consume me. Nothing about that looked dramatic from the outside. That was the point. Real freedom did not arrive like fireworks. It arrived like ordinary peace that nobody could invoice me for.